Hi everybody, it's Wednesday night and I'm coming to you from my piano studio here. Welcome. I decided to do a vlog of my presentation that we didn't get a chance to talk about today in class, but thanks to Galatia, I thought maybe I could put this on YouTube and sort of be there digitally. I'm right now in Baltimore. I'm at the Music Teachers National Association convention and presenting my master's research to what feels like the world. I'm very lucky to have gotten accepted to this conference and I'm very excited to be there. So anyway, this is what I've been reading about lately. It's called Respect in a World of Inequality by Richard Sennett. He's the same guy who wrote what I was talking about last week, and I discovered that Jim had lent me another book on his work, so I decided to delve into this. I was looking at chapter 3, called Unequal Talent. And chapter 3 began with a really nice discussion about the Leeds piano competition. And I know of the Leeds piano competition. Of course, I would never be in the Leeds piano competition. I am not of that caliber. But they talk about the year when Murray Pariah won it in 1974. And of course, I know the name Murray Pariah. He's one of the big names in piano performance at this point in history. So he's talking about how the detriments of competition, and especially in the musical arts. So Sennett writes that music competition may display inequalities of talent in such a way as to inhibit the development of expression. They may challenge the self-confidence of all but one of the participating musicians. As in, the person who wins will have a serious confirmation of their talent, but everybody else who didn't win will go on and question whether their musical ability is to be worth something. That a lot of the people in these competitions display high levels of technical demand, but they take very few risks with musical expression. Anyway, so I thought that was a nice opening anecdote with respect to talent. And so jumping right to the end, that was kind of my big question after reading this chapter, was what exactly is the difference between talent, skill, and ability? Because often those three words are used interchangeably. And I often have parents say, oh, my child is so talented. And I really wonder if they mean, does your child have a lot of skill built up because they've spent 200 hours practicing that piece? Or is there some sort of natural ability that's coming out? Or is skill plus ability, does that equal talent? Anyway, I don't have a total answer for this, but it would be interesting to discuss. Maybe you guys could discuss it and let me know what you come up with. I feel like for what I do, it would be great to have some clarification about what those three things mean. So, anyhow, carrying on, Sennett talks a lot about ability in this chapter. And he starts out by saying that ability, a shift in the idea of ability was a revolt in inherited position. And so he brings to mind somebody like Thomas Jefferson, who was saying that instead of an artificial aristocracy where people were born into wealth and privilege, just simply by the family they were born into, this natural aristocracy should arise based on people who are curious, based on worth and genius sought out of every condition of life. Anyway, so there's a shift in this idea of ability. He also points out that there's a shift in the idea of a virtuoso, which is a word that's used commonly in my line of work. I mean, I'm not a virtuoso, I don't teach any virtuosos, but it's interesting that Sennett points out that in the 18th century, a virtuoso was somebody with diverse interests. I didn't know that. Shifted into the 19th century, a virtuoso was somebody with a highly specialized skill. And so he talks about Paganini, who was an exceptional violinist, this really honed-in specialized skill. Let me read a bit here. Because this, I think, is the next step with being a virtuoso in the 20th century. So he's talking about technical skills. And he says, in part, this is due to the shifting demand in global marketplace. Organizations must change their functions, business plans, and products on short notice. The ability to learn new things quickly becomes then of more value than the capacity to go ever deeper into an existing problem or body of data. And such an ability is worth more than fixed knowledge. The potential for learning is more serviceable than past achievement. This is the economic premium put on potential ability. So I see this as where the idea of the virtuoso is going in the 21st century, is the idea or the ability to learn and shift quickly between skills, which I think is a problem for what I do because I'm trying to really hone in on a certain craft. And he does talk about this idea of craftsmanship again in this chapter, and that the ability of craft labor is this kind of obsession with detail for the most part. He's got two different ideas that I'll get to in a second, but that also craftwork is the antithesis of aptitude, and the results are the antithesis of potential. So aptitude, this concept of potential, where potential issues this promise, but it doesn't exactly specify what the promise consists of. It's just something in the future. And the contrasting idea there is that craftwork is developed by results, that you are your product, but that aptitude is the future unknown mysterious potential. And so those are two contrasting ideas. Aptitude was a big thing in this week's readings in this chapter. And he goes a little bit into a discussion of IQ tests and aptitude tests, and of course the problems with those. I thought he made a really interesting point here that IQ tests only account for 10 to 15% variance in people's earnings. And that, let's just read a bit here, that single number measures of intelligence explain some of the inequalities in schooling or work, but really not much. Family background, class, personal motivation, and sheer luck count together for more in shaping a person's future. So that aptitude is really a very small part, and that social constructs are far more important. So with this idea of aptitude, he connects that to the idea also of meritocracy that we've been talking a little bit about. And he writes that meritocracy inhibits the same linguistic country as aptitude, fusing motivation, desire, and attitude with prowess and skill. And so he goes on to say it's a very individualistic way of talking about things. And the question that came out of that is this a threat to solidarity and community? Which, yes, I would say so. A little bit later on, he talks about people who have made something of themselves and the problems that come with that. Children become strangers to their parents. Children become ashamed of their parents. I actually, just in my personal life, I see that a little bit with people who have moved away from Saskatchewan, who have a hard time relating back to their roots. He writes that parents feared their mobile offspring were becoming strangers to them. And I see that a little bit with people who've moved away from Saskatchewan, that they forget their roots. They forget where they've come from. Anyway, back to this. So, ability, I think, was an overarching theme in this, but he breaks it down into two really interesting constructs. The first is ability as the service of craft. So again, that idea of craftsmanship, where labor is an end in itself. That people pursue the craft because they're genuinely interested in it. That it's a slow process. It's a time-consuming process. It's absorptive. You cannot become a craftsman in a short period of time. This is really your life's work at stake here. So it sounds very positive, but it can also be very negative as well if it's taken to the extremes. So An obsessiveness can result in a dissociation from others. It can result in isolation. Of course, I'm reminded of people like Beethoven who were just exempt from all social rules of the day. We talked about Glenn Gould today and that kind of social inaptness. Or this obsessiveness at making your craft at the expense of relationships. So let me read another bit here. Craft labor is individuating. No rule alone, no teacher can do this work for somebody else. But craft work is the very antithesis of ability understood as potential. As a possibility, neither intentions nor imitations count, only results. So that's what I was talking about a little bit before, that the results are a testament to what you're made of, not this potential, mysterious, far-off kind of idea. Anyway, but this obsessiveness of making your craft at the expense of relationships, it kind of made me wonder if that's a bit what we do with our PhD work, that we're becoming so skilled and so refined in our craft as researchers that it comes at the expense of relationships. So I think that's an important thing to be aware of. Anyway, so this ability as service of craft is contrasted to ability as a mastery over others. And so his second idea of ability is this approval from others, displaying what you've done or what you've become. And at first glance, that doesn't seem nearly as worthy as the ability as a good in itself, as an end in itself, that intrinsic motivation. But he says that that's not so simple. Not one of those is purely good or purely bad. So he reads here that this mastery over others, it can be motivated by the effort to teach others or to mentor them. And so that's quite a positive thing, to use your ability to have influence. He also makes another interesting point here, just a bit further down the page, that the desire for excellence supposes recognition of one's own insufficiency. Just muddling through is not the point. I thought that was a great line. So, yeah, two ideas of ability, of craftsmanship, but that it can become a very individualized and sort of risky, dangerous thing. He goes on to say that protection against comparison to others, like in the piano competition he started talking about, and protection against inequality can be part of craft work as well. So he writes here that comparisons, ratings, and testings are deflected from other people into the self. One sets the critical standard internally. Craftwork certainly does not banish invidious comparison to the work of others. It does refocus a person's energies, however, to getting an act right in itself and for oneself. The craftsman can sustain his or her self-respect in an unequal world. So he's sort of saying here that you are your own worst critic, that it takes reflection and that pursuit of excellence to become a craftsperson. He doesn't use the word motivation very often, but that's sort of where I went with this chapter, that I was thinking about intrinsic motivation, and I think everybody is intrinsically motivated to excel at something. But taking to an extreme, proving one's ability to others can become a paralyzing effort. So this is how he sort of wraps up the chapter, is that that individual skill of craftsmanship has to be balanced with the community and with relationships. So he says that respect in modern society is built on a combination of merit and independence. And of course there's problems with both of those. That meritocracy doesn't take into account the circumstantial evidence of people's success, and independence ignores the concept of dependence, where in order to have meaning, I need people to depend on me, and I need to depend on other people as part of a meaningful, vibrant community. So I thought that was an interesting idea, that respect in modern society is merit plus independence, and all the problems that come along with that. So a really great chapter. I look forward to reading more of his work and using it maybe in my field of study paper. if you wanted to have a little discussion about talent, ability, and skill, I would really appreciate some clarity on that, and I look forward to being back with you next week. Have a great week, everybody. See you later.